Welcome to Job Sharing and Beyond, the Future of Work podcast that goes beyond the traditional 9 to 5. I am Karen Tischler, speaker, consultant, and host of the show, where we hear from global experts every other week to discover innovative solutions and tips on how to remain a relevant employer in the future. I am so happy to introduce my guest today. Julianne Miles is CEO and co-founder of Women Returners, the European experts in enabling professionals to return to work after an extended career break. Since 2014, Women Returners has partnered with over 80 forward-thinking organizations to lead the rapid growth of the returner program market in the UK and Ireland. As social business, Women Returners also runs the Women Returners Professional Network, providing free advice and support to 6,000 women on career break. Julianne is a Chartered Psychologist with an INSEAD MBA and a background in corporate strategy and marketing. She was awarded an MBE for services to business and equality in the Queen's Birthday Honours 2019, recognizing her role in changing the landscape for returning professionals. She is a frequent speaker and media commentator on returning to work and co-wrote the Returner Program's Best Practice Guidelines for Employers for the UK Government Equalities Office. Thank you so much, Julianne, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Karen.
It's really great to have you. Now, we have a lot of listeners from all over the world, so could you just tell them where are you calling in from, and is there a particular site or food in your area that you would recommend?
So I am calling in from Wimbledon, England. Normally, actually, it's quite an interesting time for us. Normally this week we would be inundated with tennis players,
right,
but a lot quieter than normal at the moment. So top tips for food. I think, well, if you want to see the tennis players, there's a very good Thai restaurant in Wimbledon Village. So that's the one to look out for if you're here at a non-coronavirus time.
Okay. I remember I've been to Wimbledon and it's amazing. Now, could you tell our listeners how you started Women Returners?
Well, the seed for Women Returners came when I took my own career break. So I took a 4-year career break after a first career in corporate strategy and marketing. And then I retrained as a Chartered Psychologist. So that was the origins was my personal experience of being on career break. And that point where I knew I didn't want to do what I did before. I knew I wanted to work differently. I wanted to do something engaging and interesting, but I wasn't exactly sure what that was. And I realized that there really wasn't much support. So when I developed as my own psychology practice, which was sort of focused on business psychology, I started as a bit of a pro bono sideline, supporting people who'd taken long career breaks, normally for childcare, to find their own way back into the workforce, into jobs that they found satisfying and fulfilling. And, did that very much small scale, very much sort of kitchen table type support that I was giving to people. But it became increasingly obvious to me that there was a real societal challenge here, because these people that I was working with, they were incredibly skilled, very, very talented, very capable. But actually they were facing really large barriers when they came to want to get back into the workforce. And they were finding that if they wanted to get back to their professional careers, then actually the doors were closed to them. So what I realized over the years was that there was a need to do something at a much higher level than helping individuals. And that was where Women Returners came from. So in 2012, together with a woman I co-founded the business with, Katerina, who sort of subsequently stepped down, we started writing a blog for returners. And the aim was to provide initially some positive messages, some stories saying it was possible to get back after a long career break. We shared stories of other people who'd done it. We created more positive stories. And then in 2014, that was where the business as it is now really took off, which was when we made the decision to bring the concept of a returnship into the UK. So rather than just working with individuals and providing these positive messages, we wanted to create an organisation where we could work with the employers to, flag this amazing talent pool and, very importantly, create these supported routes back to a professional role.
Now, you mentioned returnships, but then there is another program that you are running now. It's called the Supported Hiring Programs. What is that?
Yeah, so I'll explain the difference between the two. So the returnship was a concept that was actually developed in the US in around about 2008 by Goldman Sachs, but hadn't come over to the UK when we started Women Returners in 2014. And what it is it is a higher level paid professional internship. So it effectively operates like a short-term, fixed-term contract, typically 3 to 6 months, where the returner comes in. They are, very importantly, doing a professional job, using their skills and experience, and they're receiving a wrapper of support alongside, ideally with coaching, mentoring, training. So the idea is that there is a very strong likelihood of a permanent role at the end of this placement if it works for both sides. It isn't just a standalone contract. It's important to say that. The expectation on both sides is there will be an ongoing role if it works for both sides. So that's a returnship. And actually that has been the most popular form of returner program within the UK. But as we started to work with organisations on returnships, we realised that it wasn't suitable for some organisations. These businesses wanted to bring people directly into permanent roles, into what they call BAU roles. It's like business as usual roles. So we developed, and actually I can take credit for the term supported hiring, developed the concept of supported hiring to say, this is bringing in returners still in a supported way, but actually directly into permanent roles. So the concept of supported hiring is you come into an organisation, and if you've had an extended career break and you're joining into one of these BAU roles, then you receive the same sort of support, the same wrapper of coaching support as you would if you were coming in on a returnship.
I imagine if you have like a smaller organization where maybe a returnship is too big, that type of the hiring directly for a job is then the most suitable?
I think it depends, actually.
Okay.
The answer. I mean, I think we have worked with small organizations on returnships just as much as with large organizations. I mean, I think the key of whether you want to run a returnship or not, supported hiring, depends on it's a number of dimensions within your organization. The key one is actually how risk averse you are. Because you can be a very small organization and be risk averse, and you can be a very big organization and not so risk averse.
Okay.
So, if you are the concept of the returnship is effectively reduces the risk for both sides, because there is a trial period for both sides when you come in on that sort of construct. So I think actually, I mean, we may talk a bit in a minute about the concept of a cross-company returner program. And I think that's one of the ones that works particularly well if there's smaller hiring needs.
Sounds really interesting. So cross-company employer services, what exactly and how does that work exactly?
Okay, so how a cross-company returner program works is that we work together with a number of companies. And what we have found is that it works best if those companies are in the same sector. So as an example, we have, for the last couple of years, we've run a cross-company returnship program in Scotland, so across Edinburgh and Glasgow, where actually the recruitment needs of each organisation tend to be smaller than in, sort of capital in London. But actually they really were interested in the concept of bringing in returners. So we develop a program which is coordinated across a number of different companies, where each company is bringing in typically like 2 to 5 people. but actually the advertising for the returnship, the consulting for the returnship that we provide in how to do it, and very, very importantly, the support for the returnship is done on a group basis. And this has a real positive for the returners coming in, because they come in as a cohort. One of the things that returners love about a group returnship is that they get this peer group. You're sort of come in with a group of people who really understand where you're coming from. So effectively you can get that peer support. And what happens with a cross-company program is that peer support is there. It's just across organizations rather than within one organization.
Which to me, it just sounds like such a perfect, way of providing support, especially if it's, again, if it's either a smaller organization or in an area where there are multiple organizations of the same type where they could all work together. And it just sounds like such a good idea.
It works really well. I mean, one of the recent programs that we've been doing is with the Diversity Project, which is an employer-led cross-industry body, which is all about promoting diversity within the savings and investment sector. And so we have run a program that actually is in London, but it's under the Diversity Project banner. So they have partnered with us, and organisations who are members of the Diversity Project have come in under this banner to create their own returnships, but within this structure. So it's a lot more straightforward for them to do. They're coming in on an existing sort of framework. And they're able to operate it with sort of smaller numbers of people, but actually they're getting this real group benefit. And that benefits the sector more broadly, which again is really positive in terms of diversity.
Right. And then it provides such great examples what valuable employees they are, and the more role models there are, the more it helps other organizations who might have been hesitant initially.
Exactly. And I think it is important to recognize that there is hesitation, and there is still a huge hiring bias against people who don't have recent experience, particularly people who have not been doing the professional job for 5, 10, sometimes 15 years, which is the returner community that we're dealing with. And I think that's absolutely independent of the fact that these people have fantastic CVs before they put their career break and have developed this real wealth of skills and experience during their career break. They are still seen as risky candidates. And I think by coming in on a cross-company program, there is a sense of risk reduction, just the same way as there is if you're doing a returnship. So, things may evolve down the line. I mean, I'm sort of envisaging that as there are more and more role models within organizations, more and more examples of people who have come back in after long career breaks, who are operating incredibly well at these senior levels, then barriers will start to break down, and we'll probably see more supported hiring into permanent roles and fewer returnships. But I still think there's a role for both.
Yeah. So now, have you seen with COVID-19 a change in the situation for the returners? And obviously so many people are now all of a sudden working from home, and so I'm curious what you've seen.
Yeah, well, I think lots of interesting changes we've been seeing. I mean, I think in terms of returner programs and the ones that have been started during during this period, I think there was a lot of nervousness among employers thinking, is this the right time to bring returners in? Typically, we give them a lot more support. Will that work remotely? And employers have been hesitant to do that. It's been, a lot of employers have put their returner programs on hold, but we have found that this is a fantastic opportunity for those employers who have gone ahead. And that actually, we've had very positive feedback from lots of returners who have been virtually onboarded, because a lot of the support structure is put in there. So,
Right.
you have, if you are managing somebody virtually, you have regular check-in points with them. You give them more structure, you give them more support. Whilst at the same time for the returners, they've had, one of them said it's a bit of a hybrid because I'm still
Right.
at home and working from home and can keep a bit of an eye on the family, whilst actually stepping back into the workforce. I mean, there have been a lot of other challenges I'm not underestimating of homeschooling, which has been a massive in the UK. I'm not sure about in Canada. So yes, I very hard but that's the same for all working parents. But actually we have found that the returner programs have worked well. So I think that's one trend. I think the other thing is we have found that there are sort of more returners really coming into the whole market. It can be people maybe who've been doing some freelance work and have realised now there's a lot of instability there, so they want to get back into a larger, more paid professional role, or it might be that their partner has been made redundant. Obviously huge amounts of redundancies around the world at the moment, and so that's given them more of a push to get back to work. So we have found those trends coming through. And I think what is interesting, you mentioned the aspect of home working and remote working. I mean, that's been an absolute revolution again, within the UK. I imagine the same in Canada. A lot of organisations who had thought before it wasn't possible to work at home have now been forced to do it and have found that it does work. And now they have the technology, they have the processes to do it. So I think in the medium term, that will be hugely beneficial for returners, and particularly those returners who still have existing family commitments that they're working around. The fact that they'll be able to work maybe a couple of days from home where they couldn't have done before will be a real plus.
Right. Because that was sort of one of the questions, what happens, if somebody would like to return, but already knows that they cannot right now return on a full-time basis. What, are there part-time returnships, or what do they do? Or is there some other way to return?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few of the returnships now do offer flexible working. And flexible working, as we know, is not just about part-time working. It can be doing, a day from home. It can be working, starting earlier and finishing earlier. It can be those whole sort of variety of flexible working models, which actually mean that you can create a working structure which works well for the business team as well as for the returner. So we're finding a lot more openness generally to flexibility. And I think, again, because of everything that's happened during COVID, I think that will just that those opportunities for flexible working are absolutely going to increase. In terms of part-time, some of the returnships, there are options for part-time working. But what I feel is important is not to stereotype a returner and think all returners want part-time working, because very much people take career breaks at different times for different reasons. So it could be somebody who'd taken a career break maybe to look after an elderly parent who's now passed away, and actually they want to come back in and work full time. They don't want somebody to go, you have to work part time because you're a returner. Again, we do need to acknowledge that.
And now, as the returnships have evolved over time, have you noticed more men returning as well?
Well, I mean, we don't have universal stats on men versus women, but what we do know is that for people taking caring-related career breaks, round about 90% of those people are women. Now, again, I'm sharing UK stats here. There tends to be sort of similarities with that in sort of many other Western countries. And however, and this is a big however, that we do see that may change with things like, again, greater focus on, here we've got sort of shared parental leave is something that's been happening. So and more focus in these sort of new generations of dads coming through and wanting to share more equally the childcare. So I think that may shift. I mean, we're also seeing often that choice point, which is, you know, who takes the career break if there is a decision that somebody is going to, is often based on who is earning less.
Right.
Again, trends that more and, you know, more and more it is the women who are becoming the higher earner within these households. So I think that things will shift from that perspective. We're not seeing a huge amount of shift in who takes the responsibility for elder care, and, you know, typically that still falls largely on women, but clearly that can be men who take breaks as well for elder care. And I think the other thing is what we have found over the time, you know, over the last sort of 5-6 years we've been working on this, is that there has been a real broadening of the view of who a returner program is suitable for and is beneficial for. So we've had people coming in maybe who've had breaks for health reasons. We have a man who came back in on one of the construction programs who'd had cancer and was, you know, now in remission and had found it very hard to come back in because he'd had a very significant career break. We've had people who have taken breaks, maybe they've gone and worked abroad doing voluntary service or something and come back in again. That could be men as well as women. So I think as the definition of who is a returner has broadened a bit, and, you know, for me, it's always been about an understanding that if we have a 40 to 50 year career, we're all going to want or need to take career breaks. And it might be, as much as anything, just to recharge our batteries and, you know, to avoid burnout. And again, that's as much a male thing as a female thing. So I think that is so there are men coming in on these programs. I think particularly if you look at programs in areas where women are, you know, much smaller percentages. So say in engineering, if you look at an engineering type returnship, but I think so sort of, I guess to sum up, it is still the vast majority of people coming in on returner programs do tend to be women, but they are absolutely open to men as well. And we're finding that men who take career breaks have just as many challenges coming back in as women.
If I'm a senior business leader listening and are starting to think, wow, this is such an opportunity and I hadn't thought about it, to, you know, particularly focus on that more invisible part of the workforce that often really gets excluded from diversity and inclusion projects. What would you tell that person? How can one best start a returnship in one's organization?
If you're a senior business leader and you'll start to think about whether you want to bring career returners into your organization, I think the first step is putting together the business case. And the fundamental of the business case is this is a really high caliber talent pool. And we have a lot of case studies now. We have a lot of examples of people who have come back into organizations, who have come in at that mid to senior level and contributed really quickly to the organization. So, you know, and almost without exception, we get the feedback from employers, wow, we're blown away by the talent of this group. You know, as if it's like, well, that's what I've been telling you, but that's fundamentally, it's a very high caliber talent pool that you haven't been accessing so far. So and then there is the aspect of diversity. And I think it's recognizing gender diversity, as we've just talked about, is a really important part. It's often a really important rationale for running a returnship. But just as importantly, you can get this diversity, which is cognitive diversity. It's diversity of thought and experience. It's people who come in, they see the world a different way, they come in with fresh eyes. And fundamentally, that is the business benefit of diversity. It's not somebody looking different. It's actually the fact they're thinking differently. So I think you can harness that. So I think that those are absolutely the key things, as well as obviously, you know, it's the right thing for organizations to do. You know, so it's a real sweet spot for an organization where you can be doing something where there's a strong business benefit and also doing something that's good for society and the economy. So, I think that's the fundamental starting point. I think the next thing that you need to do is to make sure that you get support at all levels of the organisation. You do need support right from the top for doing a returner programme, but just as importantly, you need support from hiring managers. And unless you have both those levels, your returner programme is far less likely to work. Then make sure, if this is something that is driven by the business, make sure you get HR support. If it's driven by HR, make sure you have the business support. Yeah, so everything needs to be joined up before you get going on this in an organisation. And then I would say talk to an organisation like ourselves, who's got the expertise. Talk to other employers who've run returner programmes and really learn what it's about. Learn what some of those factors are that are important for setting it up for success, because I think it is deceptively simple, the idea of bringing in returners, but it is not as easy as just saying, oh, it's great, it's a new talent pool, we'll find some returners, we'll bring them into the organisation. You do need to recognise that this is a different group of experienced hires. Fantastically talented group, but you do need to bring them in a more supported way, and you need to make sure that your recruiters, your hiring managers, your line managers really understand about the dynamics of this group, provide the support through the transition, and then let people fly when they're back in the organisation.
A lot of the times we're talking now about lifelong learning, and so they obviously have learned a lot of skills outside of the paid workforce. But now on your website, you talk also about reskilling and lifelong learning and some courses. Could you share a bit more about that and how that helps?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is, if you are a returner, if you're somebody who has taken an extended career break, who's thinking about getting back into the workforce, it's a good time when you first start contemplating going back to work to actually upskill yourself. So I think there is a huge amount of support available, and actually a lot of that is free. So you can get support in terms of just upskilling yourself in IT. It might be Microsoft Office, some of those basic systems that you might just not have had familiarity with using before, or you might not have used for a long time. So I think, upskill yourself in IT. Upskill yourself in terms of knowledge. If you're still a member of a professional organisation, often there's a lot of knowledge-based courses that you can do. There's also a lot of free courses now online. The open learning type platforms can be incredibly useful for upskilling yourself. So I think, and just as importantly, get out there and, read the professional magazine, sort of check back into that world. So I think that is the sort of prepare yourself. From an employer's perspective, once people come back into an organisation, that's where you need to be thinking individually about what the training needs are. I think there is this typically this generalised need, which is just to get people back up to speed in IT. That might be as it might be Microsoft Office, or it might be actually everybody's own internal systems. So it's do that sooner rather than later. Don't let that be a barrier. But I also think there is then this case for just sort of upskilling people very quickly with some of the gaps, that need filling for the time that they've been out of the workforce. So I think those sort of principles apply if you're bringing somebody back into a similar role. We're also seeing an interesting rise in returner programs which are about retraining. So particularly retraining people into tech science. There's a huge need for more people generally within areas like software development, as I say, data science, program management, and there is even more of a crying need for women and diverse groups within those areas. So I think that's why we are seeing more retraining programs where they're recognizing that there is a really interesting talent pool out there who already have this understanding of the commercial world. They have skills and experience that can be built on to then retrain them into a new field.
I saw that you had recently your first virtual returner employer networking event. Could you just share a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, no, it was a fantastic event we had last week. It was the topic was running a returner program during the pandemic. And we recognized that there were some employers who were going ahead. They were launching programs, they were onboarding returners, and there were also a large number of employers who were hesitating and thinking, possible? Is it the right time? Should we wait? So what we wanted to do there was to bring the employers together to share learning. So we had a fantastic panel. We had somebody from JP Morgan, somebody from Fidelity International, somebody from dunnhumby, which is a very large data science company, and they talked about their experiences of virtually running a returner program and the opportunities that are there. The really forward-thinking, innovative employers who take a deep breath, are courageous, and say, yeah, we're going to do it because they can access this fantastic talent pool when there is sort of slightly less competition around from other employers. Because what we have found within the UK is there are now well over 100 returner employers. So if you're running a returner program normally, there's a lot of competition, particularly within financial services and tech. And we had 50 employers joined us virtually. And fantastic conversations from our panel and also within breakout rooms. So I think very, very encouraging message for us of how seriously these very big name employers were taking their responsibilities to returners, but also a lot of these employers have been running returner programs for a long time, and they know that it's something that they want to maintain, and they're looking for advice and ideas on how to do that. So I think the commitment to this talent pool, this community of returners, came across very, very strongly.
That sounds awesome. Now, is there anything we haven't touched upon today which you would like to share to our listeners?
I think if you are listening and you are an employer who is thinking about hiring returners, I would say pilot it, try it out. You don't need to be doing a huge, massive program. This is something that you can try out with a relatively, small number of people. You can run a returner program with, three roles available. Give it a try, pilot it, test and learn, develop. And I am very confident that you will quickly realize that this is a very high caliber talent pool, and that you will see the value to your organization of bringing these people in. So yeah, go for it, I think would be my message.
Thank you. Now, where can people find you, Julianne?
So womenreturners.com. We have kept it very simple. If you can email info@womenreturners.com, or you will find a lot of information on our website. And that applies just as much if you're somebody who has taken an extended career break and wants to come back in. We have a huge amount of free advice and support. If you're an employer, there are some case studies, there are examples there where you can find out about the type of work that we do. We also have a free of charge returner network. So we've now got 6,000 women returners in that network. We also have an employer network that you can sign up to if you want to find out more information. So that's the way to get the latest return to work information into your inbox.
Well, thank you so much, Julianne. It was really a pleasure having you on the show today and learning so much. And yeah, I would love to, have you come back maybe in a year or two and, hear what the latest news is and what has happened.
Oh, Karen, thank you very much for inviting me. And yes, I look forward to speaking to you again in a year's time, maybe on this podcast too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!